Welcome back to another episode of Have You Heard? Welcome, Zoe. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Jack's taken about 25 minutes to start this podcast.
My cheeks were hurting. I was laughing. So I'm here now. I've made it through. But I know today we're in full prep mode for Q4, Black Friday, and everything that encompasses
We're
it.
in prep mode all year round.
Almost, yeah. And I know a few weeks ago now, probably early last week, you did a session for the team all about this time of year.
Yeah.
Because I think it's not only important we have our clients ready, but also our team ready and like ready for taking action and getting things prepared, getting things underway, taking things into consideration when we're sort of planning campaigns, whether that's organic, creative pieces of content, influencers, or paid. So what I wanted to do today is sort of go through that session that you went with and sort of help me and help the rest of people watching sort of an overview of what we went through and what you've shared with the team.
So I've got my deck up on my phone.
Prepared that
just
one
so
earlier.
I can go through it. But basically the remit or the purpose of this deck was, one, to get the team prepared. So whether you're brand agency side, it doesn't matter. Q4 is always going to be really busy for you. Even if you're not an e-com client, we go into peak gifting season, and even if that has no relevancy to you, you still go into like silly season. Like, it's party season for everyone. People tend to have a lot of annual leave. So from a business perspective, you tend to have to manage resource in quite a smart way. Sickness bugs tend to go round in Q4, and it's managing everything. So we did this session, and it was one to make sure all of our departments are aligned on strategy. And we don't have like an overarching strategy. It's just pointers that should impact individual client strategy based on their objectives, and just also give the team a heads up of what we expect from them during Q4, and a little nod to say, like, it is going to be busy. Anyone that works in digital will find it busy across this time period. And how can we best manage that and make sure that it will impact, but as least disruptive impact as possible. That didn't make sense, but you get the drift. So we just went through, and the first bit was, the goal of the session is to make sure that we're all aligned. So we've got organic, strategy, influencer, client services, paid, creative, and internal ops and finance. And sometimes people forget that internal ops is a massive part of that conversation as well, because for finance, they're going to have increased invoicing to do over that time period if we have mass influencer campaigns going on. And that won't be just for Black Friday, because that would be silly, but across the entire time period, they're going to be processing more from that perspective.
Yep.
And also it's internal ops role to make sure the team are well cared for, make sure that we've got everything in place to make sure everyone's supported during like a peak season of work. So we then also went into sort of Q4 and why it's important for us as an agency. And we really recognize that it's stressful for clients too. And it's kind of our opportunity to take something that can be stressful and can be a bit chaotic for clients and be a really sturdy, reliable pair of hands to make sure that everything gets done, that we're, being ambassadors for them and really making agile decisions and just having those open conversations with them. So yeah, we just went into, even if a brand has a poor performing Q4, which they wouldn't tend to do based on strategy, but that could be down to a multitude of things. Half their products might not arrive, or these are very extreme examples, but
logistical issues. Right?
But even if there's a slightly underperforming sort of area, if your team has been like there to support it and has done everything they possibly can, that will at least give you findings to improve for next year. And equally, if you have a high performing Q4, but it was really chaotic and really difficult to get through, and you just look back at that time period and go, yeah, we got some good results, but it was bloody painful to get there, that's not going to be good either. So just really reiterating to the team that like we need to have that forward planning happening, and really nudging our clients and being quite forceful on the lines of, we need to start talking about this now for both of our sakes so that we're prepared moving into it. And then we just went on to like Q4. So this session was about Q4. Obviously, Black Friday is a massive part of that and tends to kind of be the start of like the peak trading season. But by definition, Q4 is October, November, December. But realistically, the impact and the prep for Q4 happens from August all the way through to Feb, whenever we see sort of the end of the impact. And so we had a little sliding scale of you have August, you really need to start implementing some processes to start increasing reach. And that, I'll just skip forward to my other slide that describes this really well. So for organic, for example, we need to be focused on reach in August, September, October, to make sure that we're really topping up our social engagers audiences from a paid perspective. Also, organic is going to get really saturated during peak trading time because people will be posting more. So it's important to reach as many new people ahead of peak season, so you can really focus on community drivers during that peak season. You've already got the engaged audience, and you'll also probably want to flip to more direct response content types, so stories where you can drive traffic directly from Instagram, and really reach driving as well will sort of continue through that. Again, for paid BAU, we would always suggest maintains across the entire time period. So, your DABA campaigns, your remarketing, just general, that should remain consistent.
Yeah.
But you will want to have a strategy, particularly for that upper funnel activity that really helps maintain that. So as we know, CPMs are going to increase throughout, really from October. So October, November, December happens every single year. Whether you have a year-on-year increase in general CPMs or not, you will definitely see an increase during that time period. So utilize the lower CPMs through August, September, and October, by potentially running some reach optimized campaigns, reach engagement, some of those like lighter objectives that are going to pull your CPMs even further down, so that you can build up those remarketing audiences for Q4 and really can gather that lower hanging fruit. It's important that that's done earlier so that you're building brand affinity and people are more aware of the products. So that's just super important. And then with influencer as well, I just did a podcast with Lucy about this, but again, you should be focusing on influencers and driving reach in that sort of pre-peak season, and then bringing them through from Black Friday onwards for story posting, like Black Friday roundups, what you should purchase, because if you just have them post from Black Friday and moving into December, again, their fees are going to hike up. And two, it may become across inauthentic.
I've seen a lot of people for influencer specifically is book their influencers as early as possible for Q4, because they know equally it's going to be a competitive time. They're going to increase in amount of brands outreaching to them. So
exactly, and
if
it's not just booking them early, it's working with them early. So influencers should not be a one-hit wonder. It's so inauthentic to the audience, and you're not going to get the results that you need. So work with them and change their content type outputs as well. So focus on Reels, focus on TikTok, focus on those types of content that really increase reach and are sent out sort of differently within the algorithm. And then when you get through to Black Friday, do stories, do everything that can kind of send people directly to site that you can sort of measure. So in general, across all of our platforms, we're focused on reach and pre-peak, which we categorize as August, September, October. And then through peak is where we flip to more of our conversion activity, which will be aided by the increased audience sizes that you'll have accumulated through pre-peak. Then we sort of put January is actually a really strong time for a lot of brands, because people sort of clean up and they can kind of come through. But when you get sort of mid to end of Jan into February, from a performance perspective, that's when things tend to get quieter, and you will really sort of see that February can often be quite a poor month from a ROAS perspective. So it's just about managing expectations and making sure that your budgets are reflective from the trends that you've seen year on year, and utilizing, strategically where CPMs are going to be cheaper and where you can build up the audiences as much as you can. Because if you can remarket based on in-platform actions such as social engagers and people that have watched a certain amount of video views, you aren't limited by cookie restrictions and stuff. So it just means it's just silly to not utilize your slightly more brand channels like your organic social and your influencer to help you do that throughout that time period.
I know you're saying obviously February can dip as well, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the work I know our paid team do specifically is try and maintain that
To up that,
momentum.
yeah.
So it's not just some massive dip, but actually we're getting close to maintenance of Q4 or slightly Q4 periods. So actually year on year, we're continuing to like go up rather than just expect the flat line, die off, and then just have the
Yeah,
same revenue year
absolutely.
on
I
year.
mean, you could year on year comparing those months, you should absolutely be
Continuously,
higher.
yeah.
It would be naive to say there won't be any drop off, but you should be working to minimize that drop off, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. And then I guess the other thing that we flagged when we're talking about strategy is just the need for agility. Just because you've put this beautiful strategy on place that in place that looks great on paper doesn't mean that consumers aren't going to react in a different way. And I think that ability to make agile decisions is super important. So we will say to clients, how are you going to work internally throughout this time period? Are you going to be at the helms of like, okay, we're going to go live 2 weeks earlier than we planned to, or we might go live later than we planned to, or we're increasing our discount like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to have those conversations with clients, and equally, how reactive do they want us to be whenever it comes to what content we're posting, when influencers are going live. Like if we see an opportunity, do we actually need to change our approvals process to a slightly less formal and more agile way of working? Like, is it better for us to do some stuff on WhatsApp as opposed to email over that time period, or GChat or Slack or whatever it is? So I think that open communication, and I think the more agile you can be, and we'll consistently go to clients and be like, hey, we've seen this with other clients. We'd suggest pulling the strategy forward a week. Can you guys do that? Does that work with your dev team? So it's just really making sure that you're listening to what consumers are doing. And on that note, we then delved into a little bit of what are people sort of saying and what are platforms saying that we can expect from consumers, and what are we saying. So overall, what we're kind of seeing across the board is that consumers care less about branding as such. And in fact, like, gone are the days of people wanting to wear, the t-shirts with like Jack Wills all over the front of them and stuff like that. People are much more into like subtle messaging and things. So branding is chuggy, apparently TikTok is saying. But what we can kind of take from that is that people care more about the quality and the overall aesthetic as opposed to like one piece making that kind of work. Obviously, that's quite a fashion oriented statement. And we do work with some fashion brands. Another point was that people really care about omnichannel purchasing. So that's potentially a good USP to add in there. So that could be, can they collect in store? Can they return in store? Can they do buying online, TikTok shop? So making it convenient for them to be able to purchase and potentially return should they need to. And then kind of aligned to the first point is that dupes trended massively this year, and that aligns to people don't really care if they can't get the original product or whatever brand's made something
especially
famous.
It's 10 times the cost.
Exactly. They will look at dupes. So I think that's just a consumer trend that potentially one maybe for clients' product teams. But what we can do from an organic perspective is take inspiration from how dupes are being marketed and how they're sort of piggybacking off the back of messaging and hashtags that are enabling them to grow from that perspective. And I think another thing that we've done a lot with clients this year is really focus on consumer messaging and priorities. So all of our clients will come to us and go, hey, here's our key product priorities for this month or this quarter. And there'll be terms that they know internally that doesn't mean anything to a consumer, and a lot of brands will try and push those terms. It doesn't mean anything. Like a coat, like a puffer coat, basically. Brands will tend to have like a really technical term that's made up of what it's made from and stuff, but to a consumer, it's a puffer coat. Like, it's not that deep. Now, they want to know why that puffer coat is better than all the other puffer coats, but to make that content visible from an organic perspective, so you can then educate them on it, you need to be using messaging that's going to be put you in the right place when consumers are searching for it. more now than ever, social is a search engine, and you can utilize that to your advantage from a paid perspective. But from an organic perspective, you need to make sure that you are visible where people are searching for those appropriate products. So just being mindful of how you want to speak about things, and then making sure that you're doing the research from an SEO perspective to then bring that into how you're talking about your products, particularly from an organic perspective, is really, really important. Another thing we talked about was how much creative do you need from a paid perspective. And so we know that TikTok, for example, is a much more creatively hungry platform than the likes of Meta. And that's because they've got cheaper CPMs. So naturally, the creative gets tired more quickly.
Well, they're saying that. I know one thing that Meta have come out with recently with Advantage Plus shopping campaigns is they're recommended is 20 plus
pieces,
creative.
But I think those 20 pieces of creative can last longer within that campaign structure. Whereas with TikTok, you probably need to be refreshing your creative
every few days,
weekly, bi-weekly. Yeah. So it's really important that we look at methods of production that can be agile. And so we then went and spoke to the team about, we've got 3 sort of core methods of production that we can do here. And it's kind of up to the teams to kind of say, okay, we think this is best for that. But the organic team can do reactive content that's curated. So taken from existing footage that we may have, or that could be utilizing filters or memes or CapCut templates. Now, really, that's more so from an organic perspective, but on platforms like TikTok, you may be able to utilize that from a paid perspective too. Probably most likely from a brand awareness perspective. We've then got our creative team, so they can produce product content, team-led content, high production content. They can do everything, basically. But sometimes it actually makes more sense to brief in content creators, particularly when we're talking from a performance perspective. And you can brief content creators in a way that means that you can get 20 different videos from just one piece of content that you've briefed them, from getting them to do the same type of messaging but delivering it in a slightly different way each time. And then that means that you can build out a creative testing strategy. We would suggest that if you're going to do creative testing, that you do it in that pre-peak season, as opposed to then pulling that through and trying to test and optimize and be agile in the middle of peak trading season.
Still going to do it, but you hopefully have all the learnings ahead of them.
It's hopefully less testing and more just optimizing at that point. And
new variants probably of existing content that works.
Yeah, 100%. So then we just chatted a little bit more about content creators, and a couple little things that we were advising the teams to do. So really looking at social remarketing audiences to help prove the value of organic social throughout that time period.
100%.
And that aligns to why we would push for reach during pre-peak season. Unique landing pages from a paid perspective across that time period too, so that we can utilize unique audiences and measure the impact that brand building activity on paid has had. Now, we don't build the landing pages currently, but we can advise clients and work with partners to do so. So it's just about having those conversations early doors. And also, now that Instagram has released that feature where you can have multiple links in your bio without having to go through a link tree service as such, that also gives us an element of flexibility as to how we can help that from an organic perspective too. Equally, something we've also done is for product feeds, a lot of the majority of businesses will use the same product feed for their Instagram shop as they will for their Instagram ads. And we've been building out bespoke feeds so we can look at on GA revenue and traffic that's coming off the organic feed versus the paid feed. And I guess that's more of an attribution conversation, and we would be recommending brands to do that anyway. But I think particularly where at times brand marketers are struggling to attribute, direct response metrics to organic social, those are some conversations that we can look to implement at that point. And then utilizing creators, a lot of brands can be scared at times to do that. We can handle all of that. We just kind of need the go ahead from them to kind of work through that. And then just making sure that, if you are a brand and you're working with an agency, and equally if you are an agency that you're asking bigger questions, to look at how your activity can have a bigger impact on the brand. So what's going on with your other agencies? Is anything happening on AV or PR? How can we line everything up to make sure that it's as best as possible? And what else did we go through? In short, this is what it says on this slide. Oops. It says get media and content plans down and think about how you're going to create the content. So align on those methods of production, get it booked in on time, know how long you're going to need for approvals. So
Yeah.
clients internally, you may need to cut down your approval time, particularly if you're going to be working on reactive content across that peak season time period. Agree on your metrics, and that's not just your individual channel metrics, that's also what complete impact are we looking for social as a whole to have? Are you looking for it to drive a certain percentage of overall site traffic? Are we looking for it to be a certain percentage of overall revenue? And how are we looking at that? Are we looking at that with in-platform metrics, or are we looking at that from a last click perspective on GA? And my final one was be agile and adapt as the data tells you. And so that goes for both brand and agency teams. And then we just said it will be really busy. And there was a little meme. And and then I did put a meme at the end that said, we're going to let this thing rip and make magic happen.
Wow. That's
so
inspirational.
Inspiring. But yeah, hopefully what we've kind of gone through is somewhat helpful. But I think that to summarize, Q4, Black Friday, however you want to put it, ultimately Black Friday is kind of the catalyst for us to move into that peak trading season. And this year, it wouldn't shock me if people started shopping a little bit earlier.
And we'll see offers and deals come earlier
you
as
will.
well.
And I think people tend to have this perspective of, okay, we're going to go at this point. And when they say go, they mean we're in peak season mode.
Yeah.
So we're discounting, we're trying to pull people in. But a lot of the time people say, okay, we're going to go on Black Friday day, but then all their competitors go 2 weeks earlier. And then they go, okay, we're going today.
Yeah.
And so it's just about being really agile and adapted to that. But it's not just that time period. It's get planned ahead of time and start your strategy so that you're making it not easier, but you're just being cleverer about how you're utilizing.
And I was speaking to someone in the office the other day, and they were saying actually they've bought or not all, but a lot of their Christmas presents already. So they're actually pre-buying ahead of peak, and they're probably going to spend less in peak versus now. But the reason that they're doing that is because they said, I don't want to get to that Christmas time and run out of money to do all the fun activity-based stuff as well. I want to buy all my presents now. So I'm not like worrying at that point, oh, can I buy that present or do I have to sacrifice doing something else as a part?
I mean, I think like every year you have like consumer behavioralists will come out with what they anticipate when they think people will purchase and stuff like that. And I don't think you should rely on that data for your strategy. Like you'll have a lot of data. I think you should have a strategy, but it just needs to be agile to kind of what we're seeing within the marketplace. And I think if you've got a good connection with your customers, you have a good community management, you're listening to what they're kind of saying, then you should be able to see what's happening at that time. I think getting too muddied into what we predict is going to happen can
I'd say the best and a good option for brands to look at is mainly to search trends, to be honest, and that's going to guide how early people are thinking about Christmas. Pinterest always put out data every year about when people are searching Christmas related stuff, and that happens in like August and like September as well, when people, you see that real uptick happening. I think taking stuff like that can then influence.
Search is like really undervalued at the minute as
it shows the existing demand of a market, and then obviously social is where you continue to create and enhance that demand. But Google is or Pinterest or other search platforms are really good at seeing those early trends about how consumers are acting,
and I think
they're looking for.
I think that can aid both organic and paid strategies and influencer strategies as well. So I think it's really important, and I just think it's underutilized across like the social landscape. And people think, let's search, like it sits over there, like it doesn't. organic is a search engine now. Like that is where particularly Gen Z are shopping, researching things. Like they'll go to TikTok over Google quite a lot of the time. So I think really lean into that and do your research on those platforms. But yeah, overall, just be smart, be clever, be agile, take your vitamins, because silly season, people get sick, and you don't want to be sick eating your Christmas dinner.
That's true. I've been there years ago.
But yeah, I think just plan ahead and be strategic and agile, and you can't really go wrong.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And yeah, make sure to check out our other Black Friday videos. We're putting a number out there, so paid, influence, and other areas of social as well. So follow along, and we'll see you very, very soon.